Acronym. That's when you go numb from way too many confusing corporate event planning terms. You know what I'm talking about. You hear them thrown around like COI, CYC, DSM, FOH, BOH, GOBO, VOG. Ah! I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Well, as you plan your corporate event, it's easy to be confused by unfamiliar event planning terms and on-site jargon. It's inescapable, but how do we make the experience better? Fortunately, there is help. In this video, you'll learn the pros and cons of using acronyms and technical terms in event production, how to seek clarification on unfamiliar terms, and best practices for using acronyms and technical terms while working with the event production agencies. So first, why is this a thing? Why do we speak in acronyms? Well, event people often must speak in shorthand with so much information they must manage and communicate efficiently, especially when coming up to the event and going live. Here's some more detail about why event producers often have to use acronyms and other abbreviations and all these technical terms, not just during the event, but throughout the entire project. It can save time and space. Acronyms, technical terms, they help us convey a lot of information in a few words, which can be helpful when we are writing things like emails, reports, proposals, contracts, and just in the course of our online communication. They can also help us avoid repetition and redundancy, and it makes our communication more concise and transparent. They can also enhance memorability and recognition. For example, here's one. NASA. Okay, we're familiar with the word NASA, what it means, but how many of us actually know what it stands for? It's more memorable than trying to remember National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So while many terms you hear aren't necessarily acronyms like those are, they're actually initialisms, meaning that they don't actually spell a word, but like VOG, BOG, ROS, those are things that aren't things we say as words, but they're meant to be much easier to refer to when so much communication is typed out. For example, in event management, FOH and BOH refer to both front of house and back of house. Those are easy to remember, or like VOG, voice of God, which is what's referred to as the invisible offstage voice, used to introduce presenters or make announcements. See what I mean? Once you become familiar with them, they all show up well in text, and especially on something like a run-of-show document, when there's, again, so much information to convey, and shorthand is sometimes what you need to fill up a short space. Also, they can create a sense of professionalism and expertise. See, acronyms and these technical terms, they help us demonstrate our knowledge and competence in our field. They can also help us establish credibility and authority with clients, partners, or other stakeholders. They can show that we are familiar with the latest trends, technologies, and best practices in event production. Also, they foster a sense of community and culture. Yes, even something like acronyms can help us create a common language and identify with colleagues, peers, or mentors. They can also help us bond with others who share our passion and interest in event production. And they make us feel part of a group or network that understands and supports each other. Basically, we get each other. So, okay, these are a lot of good reasons for having acronyms, initialisms, technical terms, just saying shorthand. But when is this a problem? While those benefits exist, there are drawbacks from too often relying on acronyms. First, they can cause confusion and misunderstanding. You see, acronyms and technical terms can have different meanings or interpretations depending on the context, audience, or industry. In other words, an acronym may mean something different to someone else. For example, in the event management industry, COI is often short for Certificate of Insurance. However, it's also a commonly used term in the financial industry for cost of investment. Now imagine how tricky that could be if you were working on an event for the financial industry and people were mistaking that for what you think it means something else to a different industry. So suppose we use these technical terms, these acronyms, without defining or clarifying them for our stakeholders. In that case, we might create a lot of confusion and misunderstanding, which leads to errors, delays, or conflicts. you can see what I get from there is they can alienate or intimidate stakeholders. Acronyms and technical terms can make our communication too complex or jargon-filled for others who are unfamiliar with them. And this makes them feel excluded, frustrated, overwhelmed, just by the information that we're trying to convey, but we're just not stopping to think about the other person doesn't know what's in our head. So what happens? They might lose interest, trust, or confidence in us and our message. And they might even sometimes feel offended or insulted by the assumption that they know what we're talking about. I remember my early experiences working on events with not even knowing what ROS meant, and that's a common term for run of show. But I didn't know it. I was new to it. And yet it was just thrown about casually, and nobody bothered to explain to newbies, what does this mean? So without that explanation, I would even find people who had worked on events sometimes did not even know what that meant. The event producers didn't explain to those folks either, and why they were too intimidated to speak up and ask, what does that mean? So I've talked about a lot of the problems that come from an overuse of acronyms, initialisms, abbreviations, technical terms, jargon monoxide, shall we say. How can you fix it? All right. To avoid pitfalls and maximize the advantages of using acronyms and technical terms in event production, the first and foremost important place to start is to have a glossary. Having an event production glossary is handy for having all the likely technical terms, brand-specific names, everything that you think of that will be needed to remember, or at least refer to during an event, before the event, that will make for much better communication, collaboration, and coordination. Here are just a few examples of what I mean, of how that's a benefit. Less email clutter. See, a glossary will help reduce so many emails that go back and forth without just a single line that says, what does blank mean? If somebody has to send an email saying, wait, what does this mean to everybody else who knows that? That's not a good use of communication. Explain it up front. See what I'm getting at? Less confusion. People need to understand each other because that is crucial to event planning and production when things are moving quickly. That's part of more trust. People, when they're open to asking questions and not intimidated for doing so, they have better communication based on trust. Now you're probably thinking, okay, this is all great. Where to get started with building out a glossary? Fortunately, I got some great tips to help you with that. Start with with a few of the essentials. Only introduce a few of these acronyms to someone who's new or people who are new, otherwise it will be overwhelming. For example, like I said, run of show, ROS. That's crucial to know early, but that's also an easy one to remember. On some events where there's a mantra, a downstage monitor, that's not an acronym, that's a technical term. But you see where we're getting at is explain that. What does that mean? Just so people can start to get familiarized themselves with what production agencies use for shorthand or these technical terms. The way you do that is put them all down of all these technical terms, have the entire list, review that list, and then working with stakeholders, decide which ones are the most important and relevant ones to introduce to newbies. Again, just a few at a time. Next, use them out of a conscious choice, not out of habit. By that, I mean think about your purpose, audience, context, and tone before you use any of these acronyms or technical terms. Think about how useful will it really be to everyone else you're communicating with? Because I've had times where event producers use acronyms that were so outdated that they were no longer applicable to what was actually going on. They just did it out of habit. That happened. Make it simple. Even complicated stuff can be simplified and needs to be. Break it down into smaller pieces so it's digestible for your audience. Think about it like you need to explain it to an 8th grader. That's a good place to go from. From there, think about where you can include some visuals. If you need to use acronyms or technical terms to describe complex concepts, processes, or products, think about what kind of easy-to-produce diagram or a chart, graph, an image or video, or demonstration you can use to illustrate them, because this can help your stakeholders and other team members understand and remember them better. And from that, this is where I get to is use analogies. This relates to my previous point about think about what your intended audience already understands and phrase it that way. Provide context. Don't only explain what something means. Help someone with context. For example, when and where it happens in an event's timeline. Does it happen in pre-production, production, during the live event, or post-production after the event? Maybe it happens in more than one place. Who does it happen with? Why would it happen? Context. Another really important thing is make this glossary accessible. By that I mean don't wait until the day of the event or when it's so close to the event time. Have these lists of terms well ahead of time. Give some time for it to marinate and seep into people's memory. I recommend putting it online in a shared workspace so people can easily refer to it and also comment on it with any questions that you can help them with. It can also be easily updated, and you can also include examples from past events too. You definitely want to encourage questions from folks. Like when leading your team meeting, always ask if anyone needs clarification on anything mentioned. You could wait after you've talked, had your good part of your discussion and saying, anyone need any help? Anyone don't understand what we're talking about? And remember, just because you're all in the event business doesn't mean you all share the same understanding. All right, bonus time. For more fun education, I highly recommend you check out the blog post, an event planning glossary, equipment and on-site terms, from the event production team over at Stagedge. You'll find a lot of easy-to-follow explanations for common event production acronyms and technical terms, which will come in very handy when producing your next event. Okay, so what have we learned? Using acronyms and technical terms in event production can be a double-edged sword. They can help us communicate more effectively and efficiently, but without also some preparation, they can hinder our communication, especially if we use them incorrectly or excessively. By following best practices like what we've gone through here, we can ensure we use them wisely and appropriately and deliver our message clearly and persuasively to stakeholders. So as you plan your next corporate event or any event, have a glossary. That'll make it more effective and efficient communication for having everyone give a great job and giving your audience a great event experience. And you'll go from acronym to acronamaste. I'm Grant Kroll, former event manager and social wordsmith. I enjoy helping tech professionals communicate better and have fun doing it with made-up words for fun connections and work solutions, which I call not spurts. Acronym is your not spurt for today. Take care, everybody. This video is brought to you by the event production team at Stagedge, your #1 solution for all your video event production needs. On-site, virtual, or hybrid, Stagedge has got your entire brand experience covered.